Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of AI Horizons with me, Jonathan Blaber, Head of AI Practice for Eden Smith. Today we have a very special guest, someone that I've known for many, many years. He has come from a recruitment background and has absolutely flourished in the technical world, and now is the director of our consulting business, and that is Nicholas Deveney, aka Nick. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. So obviously me and Nick have worked together for the best part of 10 years, I believe. So when I joined Eden Smith, it was quite crazy to see Nick in such a technical role, as I'm used to him, being in more of a sales recruitment role. So Nick, got to ask, are you missing recruitment first of all?
I'm still involved in recruitment, right? Any project you do is about having the right skills, the right people. So, and obviously as Eden Smith, we've got the staffing element. So, I'm still heavily involved in the recruitment side of it, but more from a requirements perspective, a vetting perspective, and also kind of being on the other side of the fence as a client internally, to what we need to fulfill and do our projects. So I don't miss some of the search selection. I don't miss hundreds of applications and scanning through them. Like nowadays, AI can do that for us, right? Or at least certain parts of it. But I'm more interested in how AI can make better in recruitment than actually being back in recruitment. But yeah.
It certainly is, and certainly 2025 has already, we've seen a huge kickoff on clients and their demand for AI talent, which is great. The reason I wanted to bring Nick onto the show this afternoon is that, certainly over the last few months, we've seen a rise in demand for co-pilot proof of concepts. Nick, you've absolutely, you've really excel on these kind of topics. You've done some interesting implementations. I thought it'd be great to kind of showcase a bit about what your knowledge is, and the common trends that we're seeing businesses do right now when thinking about adopting AI and using Copilot as their agentic AI system. So would be great to showcase yourself and talk a bit about what you know and that kind of thing. So, but first of all, Nick, a bit of an intro on you, I guess, and what you're doing with with our clients at Eden Smith on the consulting side.
Yeah, so I mean, like, as you said, I started off as a recruiter, but even before that, when I was in a sales role, I was like a person sales role, face-to-face sales. I've always kind of had a technical mindset, right? I used to, even in back in the recruitment side, I used to learn our terms and conditions inside out, learn the technologies inside out, understand really the logistical and the minute details, getting into the weeds of what was going on, which all came down to information and data, which I guess when I was in Eden Smith, I had the unique opportunity that we were such a small startup. When you're wearing many hats, you get involved in many different pieces, many different projects, everything from website building to marketing to sales. And one of the big challenges and problems we had was all around KPI development and tracking business metrics, right? And we learned very early on from the data world that what metrics you have changes the behaviors in an organization. And as much as we knew that we wanted to establish a very different type of at that time recruitment industry, recruitment business, and we also wanted to track different things, it meant that our kind of systems that we had didn't necessarily give us the out of the box BI reports, data that we wanted. So I spent a couple of weekends just literally learning, developing. Came back in one weekend, kind of had learned basic SQL, Python, Power BI, and showed Jez and Matt a couple of reports. I said, hey, look, this is taking our data out of here, doing some manipulations of it, doing some calculations, then presenting it in these visuals in this, is this kind of the thing we're looking for? And from there, really kind of started to take a path to learn more about data. I've been really lucky over the last 7 years now to work with some really influential people from the data industry. and very early on, from a consultancy perspective, from a data leader CDO perspective, the kind of people out there that have written the books on how to do this stuff, I was able to work with them directly, hands-on, helping them, supporting them, and learning from them. So that gave me a really good insight into the consultancy piece, and helped me build out through our customers what journeys they need to take, and when you think about a lot of this is transformation, and it comes down to having the right talent, the right people, and understanding what pathways, options there are to take. So that kind of combine that recruitment knowledge of building teams across Europe into the technical side and the data side around, well, actually now, what is it, the skills we need for the future? And AI skills, not just AI talent, AI awareness and knowledge in your overall business is detriment to the future of any organization. So yeah, that's where I've come from, and my passion in AI, and what I think about it, really, I guess.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's great to see as well now how you're so integrated with our clients, and leading these projects. But what we really wanted to dig deep on today was the co-pilot side of things, because certainly from my side, I'm seeing a huge demand. I know that we've run some proof of concept projects before for our clients. Where do we start, really? I guess what are the challenges businesses should consider when thinking about implementing Copilot?
Yeah, so I think I'm not going to go into what Copilot is. There's enough videos and bits out there, enough information from Microsoft around their AI assistant. The key thing to think about at the moment is that it is a generative AI for mainly text and getting into the image space. Right, so it's about generating content, generating text spaces. There's a few different challenges. The first thing I think you kind of need to worry about, the first thing that we have is essentially the security side. The first question we ask, how is it secure? Why is it secure? What's going on? Where it is? And I think you have to be very careful, because depending on what flavor of Copilot you take, depending on what agents you take, there's very different approaches. So the easiest and most kind of secure for implementation adoption is Microsoft 365 Copilot. So that's the Copilot that sits inside your Teams, sits inside your Outlook, sits inside your Word, your Excel, all of that. That's probably the easiest adoption. It does somehow have some technical challenges as well, but ultimately it's probably the quickest and easiest one to try and get on board with. The key thing about that is that the LLM is copied with a read-only copy into your tenant, into your Microsoft tenant. So anytime you're kind of working with it, the information's never leaving your Microsoft organization, your own estate. The agents that they're working with, even the kind of when you ask it a question about your Outlook, the LLM isn't necessarily answering all of the answer, or kind of getting all of the information. The agent is telling the LLM, I have access to these functions, to these resources. And the LLM could come back to the agent and say, hey, okay, well, why don't you go and query their mailbox for mail that was sent since this date and includes that, and then we can create a summary based on the information, the content back from that query on that piece. So, or we can provide that in a response. So everything's contained within your own estate, unless you tick the web content button, in which case then it will send that prompt, not necessarily all the information, but that prompt and other stuff out to the web to try and gather additional information. So that's probably the easiest and most secure. When you start to move to Copilot in things like Power BI, or the third-party GitHub Copilot, even going down some of the Azure Copilots, they use the OpenAI service, which means it's going out to Microsoft's LLM in the OpenAI in that sense. So that creates just a few more security challenges. Now, a lot of it is user permissions and user behavior, but the security element and understanding how is it secure, how is it protected, is one of the first challenges and questions we always get with any customer. One of the key things about all of the kind of Microsoft Copilots is they act as you as the user. So, Jono can't see information that I can see. His LLM response or his Copilot response will be different to my Copilot response because I have a different level of access, different documents, stuff like that. So it follows the user, it uses the user as delegate and only has information access they have to them. So that's probably the first big challenge that I think we see is questions around, is it secure and how secure is it, particularly when you're working with, you know, banks, insurance industries and stuff like this.
Sure. You know, when we're talking about user adoption, you know, what do businesses need to really consider around, you know, that kind of topic?
I think we've been talking with, let's say, search engines, chatbots for a long time, right? Years. Even the way that we talk with them has changed. Now all of the technology providers been trying to make it as natural language based as possible. You know, you can search in Google now, what's the weather like tomorrow in the UK, you know, and you don't need to put all of that. You could just put weather tomorrow UK. Yeah. It's how we talk with technology. They're trying to make it as natural as possible. However, we need to understand that it's not as intelligent or as advanced as we may think it is, or it may appear, in that it doesn't have the idea or the concept of context. Right, me and you could be having a conversation down the pub, and I can say, oh, you know, blah 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 is happening, you know, and you would kind of know what I'm talking about. Within the AI, it doesn't necessarily know the context of what you're talking about. Now, the agents are built to try and give context. So if you're in a Word file, you're in an Excel file, you know, it can say, hey, you know, we're in Word and we're trying to do A, B, and C. But it doesn't have all the context. So when it comes to user adoption, there's a lot of frustrations with the expectation of how it works or what they're asking. We actually worked with a really good consultant who from Prompt AI who taught about, and I'm sure I know it's a wider method, but certainly kind of exposed me a lot to a method called GCSE. So you're essentially giving your prompt the goal, the content, giving it specific information, and then its execution. So when you're writing a prompt, you'd kind of write to say like, okay, I'm a recruiter submitting a CV to an AI, you know, an AI engineer position with a banking client. So you give it kind of the kind of goal and the context around it. This candidate is, you know, this candidate has X amount of experience, or their CV is here. They have X amount of experience in A, B, and C. I want to highlight their experience in doing X, Y, and Z. So you give some specifics, you know, can you create me a short executive summary that's 2 paragraphs long that relates to this job description using the experience in their CV. So you're giving it a lot of information around what am I trying to achieve? What is it I want you to do? And here's some contents and specifics around what I want you to execute on. And then that creates a much better response. But teaching people how to do that and not just put, write me an executive summary is a very difficult challenge, or not difficult challenge. It just takes time, right? It takes adaptation for how we're used to talking, how we're used to writing. Some people have said, you know, those prompts end up being longer than maybe writing the summary yourself. But the key thing is you can save them, and once you've got the kind of pattern, you can repeat them very quickly and very easily. And you're going to get better results from that. So user adoption is one, and actually not just how users need to attach a change, but I think also how users can use it. So I think a lot of people, when we've asked them, have said, oh, you know, what are the use cases? We've gone around and tried to create a use case map. What are the use cases? They kind of don't know until you kind of show them and demo them some of the capabilities. So it's a lot of workshops around supporting them, and this is what could happen. Where in your, and I find that the easiest question to ask is, where in your job could you see some automation? Even though Copilot and AI, generative AI, is not automation, asking the question about automation and normally prompts where there's generative repetitive tasks that could be picked up by Gen AI.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, I just try and you know, imagine if, you know, back in the old school recruitment days of when, you know, we were working together and we had AI to help us, and how much time we could have, you know, had doing what we love, being on the phone, speaking to candidates, building relationships, and having kind of, AI to, record the calls, update the admin, automate some processes so that we don't make the human errors that naturally we all do, right? Because that's, we're humans, we don't make mistakes.
Yeah.
Well,
But also
I
it's
don't think you've
admin
ever made a
tasks, right?
mistake, Nick, but obviously.
There's also admin tasks, right? I think you've got we could be on a meeting like this, and with Copilot in Dynamics 365 now, I could have up your record, and it could say, okay, you've just mentioned that you've got a new telephone number. Well, Jono, could you tell me your telephone number? And it picked that up and it summarized it, and it makes that information gathering a lot easier. Microsoft say that there's 3 key areas they focused Copilot around, right? In terms of value. I'm probably skipping ahead a little bit here, but the value number 1 is the information finding, right? So as organizations, we have massive amounts of data, massive amounts of documentation, outdated, updated, stored in various different folders, different naming conventions. I don't think I've met any business that have a decent standard naming convention, and even if they do, it's only been for the last couple of years, and it's been changed X amount of years. So finding information is the first thing. Can I find a document? Can I find the most latest employee handbook? Yeah, it's buried in a SharePoint somewhere. Can I find 2 years ago the RFP that we sent over to a company as part of our consultancy to do a project? Because there's loads of this project similar to that project. That kind of stuff. It can find information very quickly, and research information quickly. Go to the web and find me. One of the use cases we done was go to the web and find me all of the negative media about this company. Yeah, key supplier risks. So this is a key supplier to our organization. If something went wrong with them, there'd be a big problem in our organization. Therefore, we need to keep on top of it. So go and do adverse media checks for me. Stuff like that. The second one is the creativity. So the blank page is the way we kind of describe it, or particularly Prompt AI describes it, in that is there I'm starting from scratch. I want to create a presentation. I want to create a presentation on AI. Yeah. It's again, if you give it that GCSE, I'm creating a presentation on AI to teach recruiters what is AI and what skills are needed. I want to create a 5-slide presentation. Here's some resources that I kind of find interesting. Can you create me a PowerPoint presentation? Yeah. And it will go, here's slide 1, here's slide 2, here's slide 3, here's slide 4. And it will basically, create that template for you. That's not to say it's a polished, finished product. It's going to need human in the loop. It's going to need someone to go through and tweak that. But it gives you that starting point of blank page. So you've got finding information, blank page, and then efficiency in meetings and communications. We have so many meetings, so many communications. It's hard to keep track of all the actions. It's hard to keep track of who said what. So that summarization of meetings or preparing for meetings is a key other value thing. So they're the 3 things that Microsoft really say it can add value and focus on in a business.
That's really interesting. But I guess I think businesses would be also concerned with what are the limitations, what can they, what are the downsides?
Downside 1 is it's still so new. So Wave 2 only came out earlier this year. Sorry. We're now in 2025, aren't we? Only came out midway through last year, and it's having updates, but the updates are so frequent, and so there are. I take the PowerPoint one, right? So it will. If I asked it to create me a PowerPoint presentation, it's literally going to put an image on the right and a text box on the left. And it's just going to copy and paste it to be the same slide 6 times, right, with different information on it. If you build out a company brand template, so one of the master templates or the master views in PowerPoint, it would use various different layouts that you have available to you and try and do them. It will try to get images from Bing that are relevant to the information. You can give it a media library and say, this is our company's brand library, use images from this, which it will do. But unless you've tagged them right, unless you've done them right, it's gonna it's not going to work. So there are some areas like PowerPoint, like Word, like Excel, that it's not quite there yet. We've hit some limitations with something like the Dynamics 365 ones, right? You ask it to give you a list of customers with a certain text field, and it tries to search for the text that start with that field, or start with that word in the field. It's like, no, I want a contains filter, not a starts with filter. There are things like, again, the interaction between them is not quite there yet. So I could be in Copilot chat or Teams Copilot, ask it to create me a PowerPoint presentation. It will give me all the slide information, but it won't necessarily open up PowerPoint and generate the slides. So I kind of have to copy that information over to PowerPoint to then get that thing. So the interaction or the journey between various different Copilot apps or uses of Copilot is a limitation. The technical readiness, are all your documents in SharePoint? You know, if you haven't gone through a SharePoint migration or OneDrive, you know, it's going to be very difficult because it doesn't have the context or the information you want. You can't reference files and folders and, you know, bits of information if you don't have it in SharePoint. So having SharePoint as your document storage is a huge coincider. It doesn't mean you have to have it to get any value from Copilot, but it's the first limitation we had with a couple of customers where, you know, they said, oh, can we do this? Well, where's all of that document? Like, we're creating an agent the way you can ask it questions about answering customer service inquiries. Well, where's all the documentation about the previous customer service queries or the policies? Oh, they're all on the local drives. You know, well, there's nowhere to point Copilot to, right? It has to be in the cloud. It has to be in SharePoint for that to work really well. What other limitations there are?
As you're talking about the technical readiness, yes, a stupid question, maybe, but do you have to have, you know, everything in Microsoft for a Copilot to be super efficient, effective?
No, I mean, Copilot Web itself is effective, right? But there are third-party add-ins, extensions, plugins, you know, that you can do across the various different parts of the estate. You know, you can connect Copilot. I mean, if you look at something like GitHub Copilot, right? Now you have to have a GitHub account and you have to license it through GitHub. But when you're in VS Studio, when you're in VS Code, it does create the suggestions through the GitHub servers. But because it's in your VS Code, your local agent within VS Code has access to your Azure Resource Management, has access to your Microsoft Graph query. So it's able to say, okay, let's go and get information, not just from your GitHub repository, but let's go and query your Azure estate to understand what VMs are available or what class this is and stuff like this. So there are third-party connectors that can expand where the data is. But realistically, you know, if you're talking about Microsoft Copilot, their core agent is M365, which is supposed to be in the applications, right? Teams chat supposed to be in the applications. You know, if you're using telephone systems that aren't connected via the Teams dialer, you're going to struggle with using it. You know, if your meetings are on Zoom, it's not going to necessarily work. You know, I'm sure those connectors will come thick and fast and they'll develop out, but it's not, Microsoft Copilot might not be the best one if you're using Zoom, Google, and other tools and technologies.
Got you. What are the I know you're very kind of your expertise lies on the Microsoft stack, but I'm sure you have knowledge on other platforms as well. Are there any, from your opinion, comparable that you know, just as, you know, effective?
Yeah, I mean, look, the majority of them are built on OpenAI, right? The expansion of OpenAI was huge, and therefore the question doesn't necessarily become how's ours different, how's ours more competitive. The question becomes, how do we build agents that interact correctly? So when I talk about agents, I talk about Copilot, right? It's the Copilot agent, like I said, has access to the LLM that is OpenAI. So it has all that information. The recent one that they put into your tenant, whichever one Microsoft are on at the moment, at the time whenever you're listening to this. But also the agent has access to your Microsoft Graph database, which stores all of your user and interaction information and relationship information. So it stores who you're meeting with, what's in your Outlook, it's APIs to pretty much any Microsoft core application. You've then got, you've got your Azure Resource Manager if you're in Azure, so it's got access to, your Azure stuff. It's got access to, if you're using PowerShell, it's got access to, here's the PowerShell libraries, and it passes that context across as part of the thing. And that's why it's called an agent, right? It's like a travel agent. It's liaison between the end person trying to get the result and then the flight company, the hotel companies, the third party providers. So it's doing that. So it's about how powerful can we build that to get the most accurate results, and then how specific can we create our agent so it doesn't just go on the web and find loads of random crap.
Yeah, that's some really good points. I think just the final wrap up would be, any kind of final bits of advice really for companies that are thinking about, going to, even just starting off small, right? I want to build a proof of concept here for this. What would your advice be?
Yeah, so I think the user adoption, you need to do stuff in tandem, right? So there are some technical readiness stuff you have to have, thinking about, what update cycles you're on, what your security policies, how well your RBAC models, this kind of stuff that you need to think about as a starting point. But it doesn't stop you getting a small pilot group and starting to trial and test some of the licensing and starting to try some of the areas. Think about where the use cases are, but there are a number of use cases that are for every business. One of Microsoft's biggest ones is meetings, right? Making the meetings more efficient. And they say that every interaction with Copilot saves on average like 11 minutes. Now we've seen some savings of like a couple of weeks within an hour, right? It's some of the savings are huge, but they're one-off and ad hoc. But they're little savings each day, every day, are the ones where it really helps is in any kind of development. So data analysts, people dealing with data, writing Excel formulas, writing Power BI DAX queries, Power M queries, PowerShell queries, writing code, Python, C#, whatever it may be. Anything that's code based is really powerful. But that doesn't mean that's the only place it has value. So I'd say take a cross section of users from various different departments and roles across the organization. We've got like a 3-tier system that we use that looks at various different personas across the business case, and then drive those personas and those use cases and test them out and just measure the value of, well, how easy or hard did you find A, B, and C to do at the beginning? How has Copilot helped you in that, and what other value has come from it? It's not cheap at the moment, and it won't, relative terms depending on your organization, but it's not necessarily cheap, but it can provide the value. So just start small, manage a few use cases where you think it can add value, think about a cross section of users, personas, departments across the organization, and make sure you measure the outputs.
That's awesome advice, mate. Really appreciate that. And I just, it's just great to see how far you've come from when I knew you from previous to how technically gifted you are now. So and super busy. So I do appreciate you dedicating some time.
Half it's not technical, right? Half it's just thinking about what are objectives, what the business is, and what the logical steps are to get there, right? There's people that, I can talk about security and LLM, but there are people who have built that kind of stuff, right? There's someone out there that a team of people that built OpenAI. So I think there's always going to be a good team of people, good talent that brings forward, and it's actually about finding the individuals who have perhaps either can foresee what the mistakes could be or the challenges could be, know the kind of steps to take to get around them, or have experienced them. Because there's lots of gotchas and lots of traps out there that can kind of stall any kind of implementation or usage of AI.
Yeah, it's so new, isn't it? Right? It's in terms of what businesses are trying to do with it, it's a scary time, but an exciting time as well. And we're certainly pleased to be a part of this community. So thanks very much for your time, Nick. I think you've been absolutely brilliant. and I hope you'll join again next year, 2026, and we can talk about some of the Copilot implementations you've been working on. That'd be great.
Awesome, brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, John.
Cheers, Nick. Thanks for listening to another episode of AI Insights with me, Jonathan Blaber, heading up our AI recruitment practice at Eden Smith. If you'd like to find out more, please visit our website, find me on LinkedIn, or email me at jonathan.blaber@edensmith.co.uk. Thanks again for listening.